Hello everyone, welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today we're going to be going over the top performers. This is Monday, so this is going to be our normal schedule for Monday. I know I didn't do a live stream yesterday. I kind of had a couple other things come up in my own life that I needed to take care of first. So if you guys were looking out for that, that's why. I'll be looking to do in the live stream again this Sunday coming up before the games. For the top performers for this week, this is going to be before the Monday night game, obviously, once again. These points are going to be based off of 6 point per passing touchdown leagues. If you're in a league that has a 4 point per passing touchdown league, just take 2 points off for each touchdown the quarterback did have. And then for wide receivers and running backs, tight ends, is all going to be PPR scoring. So without further ado, let's get started. So quarterbacks, once again, we got Russell Wilson at the top. Russell Wilson's been great so far this year. Completed 27 out of 40 passes, 315 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 22 yards rushing. Ending up with 46.8 fantasy points. I don't know much more you can really say about Russell Wilson at this point. He's been great. As the people like to call it, they're letting Russ cook this season. And just look for him to keep this up because until their defense gets better or until somebody stops them, I don't see this stopping anytime soon. Next up is Josh Allen. Josh Allen's kind of been that guy that you can start every week anyways, but he's really coming together this year. 24 out of 33, 311 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, had 8 rushing yards as well, and 1 touchdown on the ground. So he ended up with 39.24 fantasy points. He's had a very solid season. Keep rolling him out there. That's all you can say about him, pretty much. Next up is Dak Prescott. He's in the same boat as these top couple guys. 37 out of 57, 472 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. One of them was last minute. Probably should have thrown the ball away anyways because they still had 2 more downs to take a shot at the end zone. But he was trying to play catch up in that game against Russell Wilson. So can't fault him too much there. 26 rushing yards, 33.48 fantasy points. So he had a pretty solid day again. I'd expect more of it to come in the future. He's a guy that you can trust pretty much every week as well. Next up is Jared Goff. Jared Goff's had a pretty solid season, actually. 23 out of 32, 321 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, had 4 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Ended up with 31.24 fantasy points. He's looked pretty good this year, honestly. The Rams offense looks to be a little bit more back in sync. Kind of like the year they went to the Super Bowl instead of last year. He's like a high-end quarterback too. Kind of you can stream him if he's in a good matchup. Next up is Aaron Rodgers. He was 21 out of 32, 283 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 12 yards rushing as well. 30.52 fantasy points. So Aaron Rodgers, he's continuing his great start to the year. He's a guy you can pretty much throw out there most weeks unless it's a tough matchup or you have a better option available to you. Other notable performances. Maybe this was the week for the older guys. We got Aaron Rodgers here. Then Tom Brady had a good week. He threw 3 touchdowns. Drew Brees, I believe, had 3 touchdowns as well. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick as well on Thursday Night Football. If you guys missed it, he had a great game as well. And then the last guy I got as the notable for this week is just somebody that probably was on your radar going into the week just because he wasn't starting, but Nick Foles. He came in the second half for the Bears. He ended up throwing 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, leading the Bears back to victory against the Falcons. So if he starts next week, he's definitely a guy to look out for. He'll probably be in our waiver wire video coming up tomorrow. We'll do a little bit more talking about him on there as well. Then we can move over to the running backs. So top guy was Alvin Kamara. He had 58 yards rushing. He had 13 receptions for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't know what else to say about this. Obviously, with Michael Thomas gone, he got 13 receptions. So he's pretty much assumed the Michael Thomas role, but then he's also a running back at the same time. 44.7 fantasy points. Great day for him. Not too much more to say there. He's a very talented player. Next up, most people probably didn't see this one coming, but Rex Burkhead for the New England Patriots. He had 49 yards rushing. He had 49 yards receiving, 7 catches in total. 2 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown. He looked really good in this game, honestly. James White was out, so that obviously helped him play a lot more, especially on passing downs. And he was able to cash in on this big performance with 34.8 fantasy points. Probably going to be a waiver wire guy for a lot of people this week. If James White plays, you can't really expect too much from him. But if James White doesn't play, he's still an interesting guy. They are going to have Damian Harris come back at some point as well. New England Patriots backfield is just going to be a mess eventually, so don't invest too heavily in him. I was in one league where I did have to play him this week, and it turned out pretty great. Next up, Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly were two guys I liked going into this week, playing against the Carolina run defense that wasn't very good. Chargers had too many turnovers, and it kind of went into a negative game script for them. So Austin Eckler ended with 59 yards rushing, 1 touchdown, and then he had 11 receptions for 84 yards. Overall, 31.3 fantasy points. With Justin Herbert as the starting quarterback, he's definitely throwing the ball to Austin Eckler a lot more than Tyrod Taylor did. So that's definitely good news for Austin Eckler owners. If you're a person who has Joshua Kelly, this game might be a little bit concerning for you, but the fact that the game went negative early on really hurt his value. Next up is James Robinson. You guys probably saw him on Thursday Night Football. He had 46 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns there. He also chipped in for 6 receptions for 83 yards. So this undrafted free agent out of Illinois State, he could be the waiver wire pickup of the year at this point. 30.9 fantasy points. Him and Chris Thompson actually did split about snaps 50-50. So they were down in the game. But if he's in a better game script, you can expect a lot from him again. Next up, we got Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry finally had what I consider a good game, at least. 119 yards rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 receptions for 11 yards, ended up with 27 fantasy points. So he finally got into the end zone, put together a good day. So if you're a Derrick Henry owner, you're pretty happy. You're going to be rolling him out every week regardless anyways. Other notable performance we have was Dalvin Cook. He had a pretty similar game to Derrick Henry. I believe he had 2 touchdowns, like over 100 yards rushing. James Conner had a good game against the Texans. I believe he had 1 rushing touchdown as well, over 100 yards and a couple of receptions. Nick Chubb had a great game. I believe he ended up with 2 touchdowns as well. Darrell Henderson, I believe if he went over 100 yards with a rushing touchdown. And then Jeff Wilson Jr. filling in for the 49ers. McKinnon got most of the work, but Wilson chipped in for 2 late touchdowns. So he's definitely somebody I got on my list. If you haven't already picked him up, he's probably a guy to look out for this week, especially since McKinnon got banged up a little bit as well. But we'll be talking about that more in the waiver wire episode. But next, we'll move over to the wide receivers. This was I didn't really say already, but this was a real interesting week for a lot of guys coming out of nowhere. And wide receiver is a good example of that. So Tyler Lockett led the way. Tyler Lockett's somebody that was going to be in your lineup every week anyways. 13 targets, 9 receptions, 100 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 37 fantasy points. So he definitely got his share of the targets, the receptions, and the touchdowns for Seattle today. He's still Russell Wilson's favorite target, so you're going to be starting him every week. Justin Jefferson kind of came out of nowhere. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 175 yards, and 1 touchdown. 30.5 fantasy points. He's definitely a guy, he's probably going to be on a lot of waivers, so you can pick him up. I'm not sure that you can start him yet, unless you're really desperate. We want to see what he does going forward. Well, BC Johnson did not play very much in this game. It looked like Tajay Sharp was inactive. So there are a couple of factors in hand that really helped him. So we just want to see how that looks going forward. Next up, we got Keenan Allen. He had 19 targets, which is ridiculous. 13 receptions, 132 yards, 1 touchdown. 30.2 fantasy points. So it looks like he's going to be Justin Herbert's favorite wide receiver to target at least. Mike Williams did leave this game with a hamstring injury, so that is something to consider as well. They were in a negative game script, so that definitely helped him out as well. Next up, we got Allen Robinson. 13 targets, 10 receptions, 123 yards, 1 touchdown. He got 28.3 fantasy points. So this was somebody who hadn't really performed very well this year, but he definitely cashed in on his targets here. Hopefully him and Foles have good chemistry and they continue that going forward. Last but not least on the top 5 list, we have Mr. Cedric Wilson. And most of you guys are probably going to be saying, who? Because you never heard of Cedric Wilson. He honestly hadn't played too much, but he's kind of the 4th wide receiver with the Cowboys. He ended up with 7 targets, 5 receptions, 107 yards, 2 touchdowns, 27.7 fantasy points. This is probably more of a fluke performance than anything, honestly. But if you really want to do like a waiver wire stash, if you're in a deep league, you throw him on the end of your bench, see if he does anything anymore. But this is literally all he's done all year. He hasn't done anything before this. Don't expect this to happen again, I guess. Other notable performance was Allen Lazard. He looked great, filling in for Devontae Adams' role, essentially. Michael Gallup in that Seahawks game, he had a very good day. Touchdown as well. Cooper Kupp. he had a good day as I expected against that Bills defense that struggles against slot wide receivers. Brandon Ayuk was the top receiving option for the 49ers. Jordan Reed also went out in this game. Ayuk scored a rushing touchdown. He had 3 carries on the ground as well. So he's definitely somebody to pick up if he's available in your league and stash him on the end of your bench, see what he does. Last but not least, we had T. Higgins chip in with 2 touchdowns for the Bengals. Seems like he's going to be playing a little bit more. He's definitely worth stashing on your bench as well. Then we'll move over to tight ends. And tight ends were real messy this week. A lot of the top performers are guys that were not going to be started on anybody's team, essentially. And a lot of the guys that you had high expectations for didn't really pan out. So first guy on this list is Jimmy Graham himself. He had 9 targets, 6 receptions, 60 yards, 2 touchdowns, 24 fantasy points. Seems like the Bears really want to use him in the red zone, or down near the goal line at least. And with Nick Foles being the quarterback, Nick Foles does like to throw to his tight ends. Jimmy Graham has been on the field a good percentage of the time. So he doesn't look as awful as he did last year with the Packers. If he's available in your league and you're really desperate for a tight end, you could go after him and probably not feel too bad about it. Should be kind of safe, especially if he is getting this type of target share. And next up was Tyler Kroft. Tyler Kroft is the Bills tight end. He's playing because Dawson Knox, the regular starting tight end, had a concussion. He was out for this game. Tyler Kroft had 5 targets, 4 receptions, 24 yards, 2 touchdowns, 18.4 fantasy points. So he had a great game. Nobody started him, and you can't really expect too much from him to come forward. Dawson Knox should be returning. Eric Ebron's the next one. He has 7 targets, 5 receptions, 52 yards, 1 touchdown, 16.2 fantasy points. And he looked pretty good in this game. It seemed like they were using him quite a bit more. I am a Texans fan, so I watch this game quite a bit. He might not see 7 targets every week, but the fact that they're using him some in the red zone, the fact that they're using him on third downs outside, it kind of was like a wide receiver, is definitely promising for the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward, and for Eric Ebron. Probably a guy you can pick up, stash on your bench to see how he does. Next up, we had Robert Tonyan for the Packers. He had 5 targets, 5 receptions, 50 yards, 1 touchdown. He looked pretty good in this game, honestly. He's the best Packers tight end so far. That's not saying much because the Packers tight ends have not been too impressive. He had 16 fantasy points. He's definitely not somebody you really want to pick up, but unless you want to stash somebody on the end of the bench, see if he keeps performing. But he's definitely in a lot. Devontae Adams being out probably helped him out as well. Next up, we got Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz saw 10 targets, 7 receptions for 70 yards, and he had 14 fantasy points overall. Dallas Goedert left this game pretty early, and I believe Deshaun Jackson left banged up as well. I think J.J. Arcega-Whiteside got hurt. So Ertz is definitely somebody you're going to keep playing, obviously, especially with how banged up they are elsewhere, and he should see his volume increase. Like I said, tight end was pretty bad this week. The other notable performance I have was Mo Alley-Cox again. Jack Doyle was back, but he didn't factor into this game very much. Mo Alley-Cox, I think, had 3 catches for like 50 yards and a touchdown. So he's definitely somebody to monitor going forward. If he's available on waivers, maybe you go out and pick him up. But that's pretty much it for the top performers for week 3. If you guys have any other top performers that you noticed this week that you kind of didn't expect that came out of nowhere, just let me know. Like I said, there was a lot of guys like that this week. And then like tomorrow on the waiver wire video, we'll talk between these guys that kind of came out of nowhere, if they're worth picking up or not. If you guys want to get a hold of me, feel free to reach out to me at CoachCraigSports@gmail.com, on the Coach Craig Sports Facebook page, or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport. With that being said, though, if you guys liked and enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. It helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. If you're a new or current subscriber who hasn't already done so, hit that little notification bell down below, and it will let you know every single time that I post up a video. If you're new to my channel, this is my typical schedule. Monday is the top performers from the week. Tuesday is the waiver wire episode. Wednesday, we're going to do the Thursday night football preview. Thursday, we'll do DFS value picks. Friday, we'll preview all the other matchup start sits for the rest of the week. And then on Sunday, we'll be doing a live stream. Occasionally, I throw a video up on Saturday as well if I am collaborating with somebody else, or if I have Matt come in and talk about his FanDuel value picks as well. But with that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this video. Hope you guys all enjoyed, and have a great rest of your day.